Welcome back, Bilahdan, the show with an accent for those without one. We've been doing this show for, almost 25 years, and we've gone through a lot of phases and a lot of interesting stories, and we have been telling the story of the community and the story of immigrants, story of hyphenated Americans for more than 20 years, 25 years. Good one, bad one, complicated. So today we're going to be telling the story of the election. We're going to meet with Professor David Schultz.
And here I am.
And here he is. How are you?
I am good. How about you today?
I have no idea. I've been watching 3 or 4 soccer games every single day. The World Cup, and I'm trying to avoid the complicated issue. The weather wasn't not so bad, but once you get into it, it's really fascinating and addictive. And of course, there is a lot of subscript and stories. And
Right.
this is every 4 years. People come together. The world come together to play the beautiful game. They don't fight. They don't. Small country from former colonies playing with the imperialist.
That's right.
For imperialists, and they have a chance to. At least for a fair game and fair rules. So I'm looking at the historical, the human story that we see it every day. As I know, the midterm has been a few weeks now.
Right.
Everybody was afraid is a avalanche of Republican, gaining this, but it did not happen. The sky did not fall, and Democrats still hold the Senate, and I don't know what the Congress representatives still losing by a few. So what happened? What happened to the Republican Party? Why there was not a sweep, and how the Trumpies and the people who really bought into the Trump fantasy lost everywhere.
Yeah. Well, first off, to use the media language, wants to say, was it a red wave? Was it a blue wave? It wasn't a wave either way. I would call it kind of a purple ripple or something like
Okay,
that.
yeah.
And I say that because both parties get to claim some victories in this. I mean, the Republicans take the U.S. House of Representatives, the Democrats hold the Senate. On the other hand, 5 million more people voted for Republican candidates for the House of Representatives than voted for Democratic candidates. 500,000 more voters voted for Republican senatorial candidates than for Democrats. So, yeah, the Democrats win by not losing as badly as they should have, because the script going into this election, I call it the pollsters, pundits, and political scientists script it was supposed to be, the big red wave. The Republicans were supposed to just, demolish the Democrats, and it didn't happen. And we can point to things such as, okay, abortion politics and so forth, but let's cut down to the chase of partly what it was about. The Republicans nominated some pretty awful candidates when you think about it.
They always do.
Yeah, they always do.
Clowns and actors and racists and.
That's right. That's their usual assortment. But on top of that, they also have people like Herschel Walker, who may or may not lose, but Dr. Oz. I mean, so part of it was they had a bad candidates. I think they still have a bad message, and I think a certain amount of hubris in terms of thinking they're just going to clean up on this one. And I think that's part of what happened. I also think this was the third election in a row where Donald Trump was basically involved. And guess what? In 18 and 20 and 22, Donald Trump or Trumpistas get routed. I think in part this was an election that was yet again a referendum on Trump. But I do want to say that it's something about the Republican Party too. There's a piece for some of your listeners who don't who are not in the Twin Cities or the Minnesota area. There's a piece in the Star Tribune today by Annette Meeks, who ran for lieutenant governor as Republican a few years ago, and she talks about why Republicans aren't doing well, and she says it's bad messaging. Nah, it's not bad messaging. It's bad message. They just have a bad message. People don't buy into it. Not that the Democrats have a good message, but the Republicans have a worse one. At the end of the day, their message is what? Uh, Race. Their message is obstruction. Their message is what? Nothing. They don't have a narrative.
The big
So
lie. How about the
the big
big lie?
Oh, the big lie. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that we have stolen elections. We have not just stolen elections, but people like you are stealing our jobs. I mean, heck,
I have no
all those.
job.
See. But it's the big lie, not just the lie about elections, but
Yeah.
seriously, it's the lie about immigrants. It's the lie about Arabs. It's the lie about Muslims. Fill in the blank. It is the big lies, I would call it.
Yeah. So how long is this going to stay? I thought was the Democrats won. Trump came. I mean, Biden came, and he's gonna change the course. But I don't see a whole lot. He's still dealing with Ben Salman. He's still, dealing with, economic wise. He's still
Right.
siding with the corporation more than with
Right.
the people. So what is Biden trying to do?
Not be Trump officially. That's about it. I mean,
Is
I
that
still say
enough?
well, it's enough to get elected, but certainly not to get anything done. And that's part of the problem is that I think the Democrats have been somewhat successful, at least in these three last elections, to say we're not Trump. And that's been enough to get them across the finish line. But we're not Trump is not enough for an agenda. Uh, in many ways, Biden is still doing a lot of stuff that Trump was already doing. People don't know, for example, that quietly Biden is still what completing our sections of the border wall along Mexico. He's continuing the policies in terms of actions regarding, let us say, um, um, China. Uh, I don't see any significant change in policy in the Middle East. And now that Netanyahu is back again, we're going to go back to where we were, a couple of years ago. Nothing's going to change there. So in large extent, Biden is a change in tone, maybe a change in style, but not a substantive major revolution. If people want to use that
Isn't that
phrase.
the problem with the Democrats, with the Democrat Party? It's just really we're not Republican, we're not Trump. It's just cosmetic.
No, I think you're right. What was this great line? Was it the line about Lyndon Johnson had about DM at one point when they said, "What? He's a son of a bitch," but he said, "Yeah, he's our son of a bitch." And we know where he stands. And you're right. You knew where Trump stood. I mean, he cut through all the veneer. You knew he was a racist. You knew he was a nationalist. You knew he was xenophobic, et cetera, et cetera. But you knew exactly where he is. Um, and with Biden to some extent, that's why I go back to it. It's there are some subtle changes. I mean,
Yeah, of course
domestically,
there
we're
is.
looking at
Yeah.
yeah, but internationally, there's not an abrupt shift in U.S. foreign policy. Yeah, a little bit more multilateral again, but at the end of the day, I'm trying to think what we're almost 2 years into the Biden presidency. I don't see um, any rapprochement, with Iran at this point. I mean, I don't see any real change in foreign policy there. I don't see any change in terms of, let us say, Israeli, Egyptian, Saudi Arabian relations. In fact, if anything, um, the Biden administration seems to be trying to figure out ways to cozy up to Saudi Arabia at all costs.
Yeah, and Sisi of Egypt, a military coup, a dictator. We're not going to deal with the dictator. I'm not going to give him a blank check like what Trump did with
Right.
Sisi. But now he's cozying up with him, and people are still in jail, and he's still, in full control, using the military and the army to protect him. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
every country has an army to protect. The only place where the army has a country. I mean, it seems like Trump is. If it wasn't Trump, the Democrats would create another one. It's
Right.
useful for them.
Oh yeah, I was going to say the best thing to happen to Joe Biden was the fact, from an electoral perspective, is that the Republicans have the House and Trump is running. What he gets to do for the next 2 years is to blame everything on the Republicans and say, "I would have done X, Y, and Z, but for those rotten Republicans." And he now gets to run against Donald Trump. Boy, if you couldn't have created a better Hollywood story for Biden, the question, of course, becomes: is it going to be Biden? Uh, he's going to be what, 82 years old at that point,
It
and
doesn't look good
he does not look
for
good.
an 80 years old.
Yeah, yeah. I remember in the was it the last 2 years of the Reagan administration, and Ronald Reagan. We now know something we always suspected. He had early onset of Alzheimer's at that point. There are sometimes I look at Joe Biden and he's got a Ronald Reagan look on his face, if
Yeah,
you know what I mean.
yeah, yeah. It is. How this is going to play out in the Democratic Party? I mean, how the Democratic bosses going to handle this?
Yeah,
Is he up to the challenge of whoever the Republican going to throw at him in 2024?
that's a
He's
really
going to
good
beat you.
question here because if it's Trump, I do think he beats him again because if I can say one more thing about this election, what I think this election in 2022 isn't partly about was what the voters at the end of the day said, let's not rock the boat. Let's not make any real significant changes. Only one US Senate race flipped from party control. Fetterman won, Oz lost. Outside of that, 98% of those who ran for Congress won, just about all along the line, very few chambers flipped, et cetera, et cetera. I think Biden runs on status quo in 2026, and that probably or 2024 that probably gets him quite far. But the question becomes: let's say he doesn't run. Who's it going to be? Well, almost nobody thinks it's going to be Kamala Harris. She's not impressed anybody. If I
Where is
had to
she?
do
Where is
a
she anyway?
long
Is she still out there? I've never heard. I haven't heard of her since the last two
she, she,
years.
she's somewhere out there doing something. There's this great joke once I remember about vice presidents a long time ago, and someone said there once were two brothers. One became a missionary to Africa. The other became vice president and never were heard of from again. So vice vice presidents are usually kind of put on a shelf and put off to the side. And she might be the weakest vice president we've had since before Walter Mondale. She just doesn't seem to have any presence. The story that I'm hearing, the rumor that I'm hearing, Gretchen Whitmer from Michigan is the rising star, and she could very well be, if Biden doesn't run, she could be the person who runs in 2024
As a president, not as a vice president.
as a president. Yeah, if Biden doesn't run, I think her and I think Buttigieg. I know Buttigieg wants to be president. Um, Very, very ambitious.
Mm. I mean, when you look at what's out there, most reasonable, makes sense. He is the one.
Yeah.
He is the one making, original ideas, and he has an ambitious agenda. Not this tiring rhetoric of the Democrats. They always come and say everything in this and education and
Right,
tax and all this tiring, boring topics that we don't know what that means. But
right.
he comes up with original ideas, and
Yeah,
he seems like he believes in them. He might be
yeah.
the one that people rally the people around him.
It's a possibility. He's young. He's got many years. He can keep. He can. Let's see. What is he, about 40 years old or so? At
Yeah,
this rate, with Biden being 80, he could run. What is it now? 10. What is it, like 10 times for president or something like that?
until you get it right.
It's still get it, and eventually get it right or win or something.
Eventually, yeah.
It's almost as good. How many times has I think Biden ran 3 times? What, third time is a charm or something like that? So
Yeah.
it took him 40 years to become president. Maybe Buttigieg can do it in quicker than 40 years.
Yeah, that's how the party works. It's not your
Yeah,
turn. Stay there in the back. It's not
that's
your
right.
turn.
Exactly.
He's older than you. What is
Yeah,
this? This is like a senior citizen an institution here.
yeah.
Go by the elderly here. So the election of 2024 is still 2 years ahead. A lot of things could happen in the last 2 years.
Right.
that could change the political map or landscape. And so, what are the hardest issue that the American people are really will go to vote? Will motivate American people to go and vote because they still a lot of people.
Well, right now it's not. Yeah, right now it's not foreign policy issues. It's cluster of issues. It's always the economy. An economy can mean inflation. It can mean a few different things. It's the economy. To some voters, it clearly is the abortion issue. For some voters who are younger, it's the climate change issue. There's a cluster of probably, again, those handful: abortion, economy, crime, climate change. Um, uh, for some, maybe it's about racism. But once you get beyond the economy, once you get beyond maybe abortion, everything else drops off. And I mention this because, a couple, 2 years ago, we're coming up to what, 2.5 years, almost 2 3/4 years since the murder of George Floyd.
Yeah.
And everybody said race is going to now become, the big issue. For the most part, we're looking at a U.S. Supreme Court that's going to dismantle affirmative action, going to dismantle the remaining parts of the Voting Rights Act. I actually think that George Floyd moment for race has already closed its door. That we've already forgotten the fact that we have a problem of racism in America, and we're going to go back to what we were doing before.
Wow. And I think you're probably right because a lot of what they call centrists or soft Democrats, they get scared
Yeah,
of that Black Lives Matter
right.
and defund the police. And those people who really supported, this movement in the beginning, and they
Right.
are anti-racism.
Sure.
Now, oh, look, wait a minute.
Yep.
Maybe a racist police better than no police or
Yeah.
I mean the security safety and I mean this is not really a new thing. This has been always
Of course.
a game we play and this is really I mean is it the time to really ask the big question and tackle major issue and instead of dividing everything and splitting to identity politics and Me Too movement, Black Lives Matter, and this inflation and this, everybody have a sign, and we don't know what really is going on. What really galvanized all of this? There must
Yeah.
be a bigger issue that can, be the umbrella of all this minor issue, so we
Well,
can motivate people to go out and fight for this.
yeah. Well, for me, I'm old line in terms of saying that what should the issue be? Class. At the end of the day, think it ought to be taking on the issue of class
We don't
divide in
talk
America.
about class enough.
Yeah. We don't really. I mean, we have the worst economic divide in American history that we've ever had. Globally, of course, the old-fashioned term was what, north-south divide.
Mm-hmm.
People use different terms now, but we've got an enormous problem with class. And as I always like to say, we have a class warfare going on, but only one side is fighting. That is, the top 1% or whatever you want to describe, and they've done an incredibly good job of getting the rest of us to fight against ourselves. And so, to me, the message has to be something about economic. When I say economics, it's about fundamentally, it's about class in America and class in the world, the economic divide.
Are the Americans ready to hear this? They can't even allow
Yeah,
critical race wherever they can,
yeah,
even the people on the left.
yeah. No, my suspicion is that you may be right that we can't do this, but it might be easier to talk about class, believe it or not, than talk about race because Americans don't know how to talk about race.
Maybe we are up to something here.
Yeah, yeah,
Maybe the next uh, candidate for in 2024 be watching this show and pick up on these things. Because people are tired of this. Maybe race and racism and police. This is
yeah,
not the issues. Maybe let's talk about race again. I mean, class.
yeah.
Well, on this note, Professor Schultz, thank you so much. And Professor David Schultz, Professor of Political Science at Hamlin University, and he's and a sabbatical, and doing teaching in law school there in U of M, right?
Right. And if I can do one shameless thing, hold on.
You have a new book.
I have a new book,
Ouch!
Trumpism.
My goodness, I didn't know about this.
Look at that lovely skull on his face.
Who designed this?
Uh, it's my book on Trumpism, American politics in the age of polytainment. Available. It's a short read. It's 130 pages. Folks will love it.
Okay, not to tell us what's in 130 pages, but tell us the premises of this book and why do you have to
Okay.
write it?
Okay. Two premises of the book. The first thing is to try to make sense of Trump. And I argue that Trump is not just about a person, it's about a political movement, it's about a set of values, about how American politics is thought about today. And I talk about that. The second thing it's about is to say, after we cut through all the noise, there still is a basic formula for winning politics. And so I talk about the 10 rules of politics for what candidates need to do to be successful to win. And so that's the book, explaining Trump and Trumpism and explaining the art of politics for winning.
Wow, this is very useful and now especially timely
Yep. And
too.
I can send you a copy of the book and we can maybe talk about it in a future show.